Overthinking does not begin as weakness. It begins as intelligence without discipline. The mind wants certainty, safety, and control, so it replays situations again and again. But the Stoics warned that an uncontrolled mind becomes its own enemy. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind shapes reality, and when thoughts are scattered, life feels chaotic. This series is about ending mental noise and training your mind to think with the calm, precision, and strength of the top 1%. Overthinking steals peace. Discipline restores it. Chapter 1. See overthinking for what it really is. Overthinking feels productive, but it is not. It creates the illusion of control while quietly draining clarity, energy, and confidence. The Stoics understood this long before psychology gave it a name. Marcus Aurelius warned that a mind disturbed by unnecessary thoughts becomes weak even when the body is strong. To train your mind like the top 1%, you must first see overthinking clearly, without comfort or excuses. Overthinking is not deep thinking. Deep thinking leads to insight and action. Overthinking leads to loops and paralysis. One moves forward, the other spins in place. Most people confuse the two and end up mentally exhausted without progress. Stoicism begins by separating what is useful from what is destructive. At its core, overthinking is fear disguised as analysis. The mind tries to predict every outcome to avoid pain, embarrassment, or failure. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events, but from the stories we attach to them. Overthinking is the endless creation of these stories. None of them are real, yet all of them feel urgent. The Stoics believed the mind should serve life, not dominate it. When thoughts multiply without direction, the mind becomes a tyrant. It demands answers that do not exist and certainty that cannot be achieved. This constant demand creates anxiety. Calm returns only when the mind is put back in its proper role. Most overthinking happens in the future. You imagine conversations, mistakes, losses, and disasters that have not occurred. Seneca warned that anxiety is pain felt too early. By living mentally in the future, you abandon the only place where action is possible, the present moment. The top 1% think differently. They do not allow thoughts to roam freely. They train their minds like a disciplined army. Each thought must serve a purpose, or it is dismissed. Stoicism teaches this mental gatekeeping as a daily practice. Overthinking also feeds on indecision. When you refuse to choose, the mind keeps analyzing. Marcus Aurelius believed that hesitation weakens the soul. A wrong decision made with clarity is often better than endless hesitation fueled by fear. The mind overthinks when it believes perfection is required. You wait for the perfect plan, the perfect timing, the perfect confidence. The Stoics rejected perfection. They valued progress guided by reason. Overthinking fades when action begins. Another source of overthinking is attachment to outcomes. You want control over results that are not yours to command. Epictetus taught a clear rule: focus on what is within your control and release the rest. Overthinking thrives when this rule is ignored. The mind also overthinks when identity becomes fragile. You worry about how you appear, how you are judged, and how mistakes define you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that opinions of others are external and therefore powerless unless invited in. Overthinking often disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you are being careful or thoughtful. In reality, you are delaying discomfort. Stoicism does not avoid discomfort. It trains you to face it calmly. The body reacts to overthinking as if danger is present. Heart rate rises, sleep suffers, tension builds. Seneca believed peace of mind was essential for physical health. A restless mind slowly damages the body. To break overthinking, you must first stop trusting every thought. Thoughts are impressions, not commands. Epictetus taught that discipline begins by questioning thoughts before accepting them. This single practice weakens overthinking immediately. Overthinking also grows when you consume too much information. Opinions, news, and advice flood the mind. The Stoics practice selective attention. Less input creates more clarity. The top 1% simplify decisions. They reduce options. Overthinking thrives on excess choice. Simplicity starves it. Marcus Aurelius lived simply not because he lacked options, but because simplicity preserved focus. Another hidden cause of overthinking is unresolved emotion. Feelings ignored become thoughts repeated. Stoicism does not suppress emotion, it observes it calmly. When emotion is acknowledged, the mind relaxes. Overthinking makes problems feel larger than they are. One mistake becomes a pattern. One failure becomes an identity. Seneca warned against magnifying troubles through imagination. Reality is often lighter than the stories we create. When you see overthinking clearly, you stop fighting it emotionally. You observe it without panic. Observation creates distance. Distance creates control. The disciplined mind asks one question: does this thought help me act with wisdom or virtue? If the answer is no, the thought is released. Overthinking also fades when values are clear. When you know what matters, decisions simplify. Marcus Aurelius believed confusion came from unclear priorities. The top 1% do not eliminate thinking, they refine it. They think with intention. Stoicism teaches that clarity is a skill built through practice, not talent. Overthinking steals time. Time is life. Epictetus taught that wasting time is the greatest loss because it cannot be recovered. When you see overthinking as a habit rather than a personality trait, change becomes possible. Habits can be retrained. Identity feels permanent. Stoicism removes this illusion. Overthinking also weakens confidence. When you doubt every step, momentum dies. Action restores confidence faster than thought ever will. The Stoics believed courage was mental before physical. Courage is acting despite uncertainty. Overthinking avoids uncertainty. Courage accepts it. To think like the top 1%, you must value calm over certainty. Calm allows adaptation. Certainty demands control. Overthinking promises safety but delivers paralysis. Discipline delivers movement. This chapter teaches a foundational Stoic truth. The mind must be trained, not obeyed. When you stop believing every thought, clarity begins. And when clarity replaces noise, your mind finally works for you, not against you. Chapter 2. Cut the noise and restore inner silence. Overthinking survives on noise. Noise in the mind. Noise in the environment. Noise in the expectations of others. The Stoics believed that silence was not emptiness, but power. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul grows strong when it withdraws into itself. To think like the top 1%, you must first learn how to cut noise without guilt. Noise is not only sound. It is information without purpose. Endless opinions, constant notifications, unnecessary conversations, and emotional drama all compete for attention. Each one pulls the mind away from clarity. The Stoics practiced intentional withdrawal, not from life, but from distraction. Most people believe they must respond to everything, every message, every comment, every demand. This belief keeps the mind reactive and scattered. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you stop being controlled by external calls for attention. The top 1% protect their mental space fiercely. They understand that attention is a limited resource. What you focus on repeatedly shapes how you think. Noise weakens focus. Silence strengthens it. Overthinking grows when the mind is overstimulated. Too much input leaves no room for reflection. Seneca warned that a crowded mind cannot think deeply. Silence creates space for reason to speak. Cutting noise begins with awareness. Notice what drains you mentally. Some conversations leave you calm. Others leave you restless. Stoicism teaches you to choose environments that support clarity, not chaos. Social noise is one of the greatest threats to calm thinking. Gossip, comparison, and constant judgment pull the mind outward. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the opinions of others are temporary and often uninformed. Internal peace requires selective attention. Another form of noise is mental clutter. Replaying old conversations, imagining future conflicts, regretting past choices. These loops exhaust the mind. Epictetus taught that what is done cannot be undone. The wise mind does not argue with the past. Digital noise deserves special attention. Endless scrolling fills the mind with fragments. Nothing is finished. Nothing is absorbed fully. The Stoics valued depth over quantity. Fewer inputs, fully considered, create wisdom. Silence also exposes discomfort. Many people avoid silence because it reveals unresolved thoughts. Stoicism does not escape discomfort. It uses silence to face it calmly. What you avoid controls you. What you face loses power. The mind becomes sharp when silence becomes familiar. At first, quiet feels uncomfortable. Over time, it becomes restorative. Seneca believed that daily solitude was essential for self-mastery. Cutting noise does not mean isolation, it means intention. You choose when to engage and when to withdraw. This choice restores control. Overthinking weakens when external stimulation decreases. The mind settles naturally when not constantly provoked. Calm is not forced, it emerges. Another hidden noise is emotional obligation, feeling responsible for everyone's feelings. Stoicism teaches emotional boundaries. You may act with kindness without absorbing chaos. The top 1% schedule silence. They treat it as training, not leisure. Silence sharpens judgment. Noise dulls it. Physical clutter also affects the mind. Mess creates subtle tension. Marcus Aurelius valued simplicity in surroundings because order outside supports order within. The Stoics practiced mindful speech. Not every thought deserves expression. Silence is often wiser than explanation. Speaking less reduces regret. Noise also comes from urgency culture. Everything feels immediate. Everything feels important. Stoicism restores perspective. Very little is urgent. Most things can wait. Overthinking thrives on urgency. Calm thinking requires patience. Seneca warned that haste leads to error. Silence allows you to hear reason. Reason speaks softly. Noise shouts. If you never quiet the world, wisdom remains unheard. Another source of noise is self-criticism. Harsh inner dialogue creates mental chaos. Stoicism replaces judgment with observation. You note errors without cruelty. The disciplined mind speaks to itself with respect. Calm follows self-respect. Silence also strengthens emotional regulation. Without constant stimulation, emotions rise and fall naturally. You learn that feelings are temporary. This reduces fear of them. The Stoics believed peace came from alignment. When actions match values, the mind rests. Noise often signals misalignment. Cutting noise requires courage. People may misunderstand your boundaries. They may call you distant. Stoicism teaches that approval is not required for peace. The top 1% accept temporary discomfort for long-term clarity. Silence may feel lonely at first. Clarity rewards patience. Noise feeds ego. Silence humbles it. In silence, you see yourself clearly. Another form of noise is overplanning. Planning has value, but excessive planning becomes avoidance. Action clarifies what thought cannot. Marcus Aurelius believed that doing the next right thing mattered more than perfect preparation. Silence improves decision-making. With fewer voices in the mind, intuition strengthens. Stoicism respects intuition guided by reason. The mind cannot overthink what it does not repeatedly feed. Starve noise and overthinking weakens. Cutting noise also improves presence. When the mind is not elsewhere, life feels fuller. Even simple moments feel grounded. Stoicism teaches that peace is not found by adding more, but by removing excess. Silence restores energy. Noise drains it. The disciplined mind learns to enjoy its own company. This independence builds strength. When you cut noise, you regain ownership of your thoughts. Clarity becomes natural. Calm becomes stable, and overthinking begins to fade. Chapter 3. Master your inner dialogue and reclaim control. Overthinking is not caused by events. It is caused by how you speak to yourself about those events. The Stoics understood that the mind becomes either a guide or a tyrant, depending on the quality of its inner dialogue. Marcus Aurelius wrote that your life is shaped by your thoughts. To think like the top 1%, you must train the voice inside your mind to serve you, not sabotage you. Most people are unaware of how harsh their inner voice is. They criticize mistakes, exaggerate risks, and predict failure before action begins. This constant commentary creates mental fatigue. Stoicism teaches observation instead of judgment. You notice thoughts without believing all of them. The inner dialogue becomes destructive when it pretends to protect you. It says worry prevents failure. It claims fear keeps you safe. In reality, excessive thinking weakens courage. Epictetus taught that people suffer not from events, but from opinions about events. Change the opinion, and suffering dissolves. The top 1% treat thoughts as tools, not truths. They question negative narratives. They replace emotional exaggeration with rational assessment. This discipline restores control. Overthinking often begins with imagined futures. The mind travels forward and creates problems that do not exist yet. Stoicism anchors the mind in the present. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the present moment is all you ever live in. Fear lives in the future. Calm lives now. Your inner dialogue should sound like a wise mentor, not a hostile judge. When a mistake happens, the Stoic response is not insult, but correction. What can be learned? What can be improved? This approach reduces emotional noise. Another source of overthinking is comparison. The inner voice measures your progress against others. Stoicism rejects this habit. Epictetus taught that comparing yourself to others is irrelevant because everyone walks a different path. The only meaningful comparison is between who you were and who you are becoming. Language matters deeply. Words shape emotion. When you say I am overwhelmed, the mind tightens. When you say this is challenging but manageable, the body relaxes. Stoicism emphasizes choosing words that support stability. The inner dialogue must be trained daily. Without training, it defaults to fear-based patterns. Marcus Aurelius practiced writing reminders to himself. These reminders replaced panic with reason. Overthinking also feeds on self-doubt. The voice asks, "What if I fail repeatedly?" Stoicism reframes failure as feedback. Seneca believed that mistakes are teachers, not verdicts. This belief transforms anxiety into growth. Silencing the inner critic does not mean suppressing thought. It means guiding it. Reason does not shout, it speaks calmly. You learn to slow the pace of thought. The disciplined mind asks useful questions. What is within my control? What action can I take now? These questions redirect energy from rumination to action. Overthinking weakens when thoughts are tested against reality. Most fears dissolve when examined closely. Stoicism encouraged rational examination instead of emotional storytelling. Another powerful practice is naming thoughts as thoughts. Instead of saying this will go wrong, say I am having a thought that this may go wrong. This small shift creates distance. Distance restores control. The top 1% do not seek perfect confidence. They seek clarity. Clarity comes from honest self-talk. The inner dialogue should encourage effort, not guarantee outcomes. Stoicism teaches commitment to action, not attachment to results. This frees the mind from pressure. When your inner voice becomes calm, decisions become simpler. You stop arguing with yourself endlessly. You choose and move forward. Overthinking often masks avoidance. The mind stays busy to delay action. Marcus Aurelius believed that doing what must be done dissolves anxiety faster than endless thought. Self-respect grows when you keep promises to yourself. Each completed action strengthens the inner voice. It becomes supportive instead of critical. Stoicism teaches emotional neutrality in self-talk, not harsh, not indulgent, balanced. This balance sustains long-term focus. When emotions rise, the inner dialogue should slow the body. Breathe, pause, observe. These commands restore physiological calm. Another trap is catastrophizing. Imagining worst-case scenarios drains energy. Stoicism asks what is most likely, not what is most frightening. The mind learns through repetition. Speak to yourself with discipline consistently. Over time, calm becomes automatic. The inner dialogue also shapes identity. If you tell yourself you are resilient, the mind searches for proof. Identity follows language. The Stoics believe dignity begins inside. How you speak to yourself determines how you stand in the world. Overthinking fades when self-trust grows. Trust grows through action aligned with values. You do not need to silence thought. You need to civilize it. The trained inner voice becomes a source of strength during pressure. Calm thinking is not passive, it is guided. And when the mind is guided well, clarity replaces chaos. Chapter 4. Reduce the mind by simplifying your life. Overthinking does not live only in the mind. It is fed by the way you live. The Stoics understood that mental noise increases when life becomes cluttered. Too many choices, too many obligations, too much information, all compete for attention. The top 1% think clearly because they simplify relentlessly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that a calm life is built by removing what is unnecessary. Most people try to fix overthinking by adding techniques. They read more advice, consume more content, and search for better strategies. Stoicism takes the opposite approach. It teaches subtraction. Calm is not added. It is revealed when excess is removed. A crowded schedule creates a crowded mind. When every hour is filled, the brain never rests. Thoughts spill over into each other. Decisions become rushed. Seneca warned that people are not short of time, but waste much of it. Simplifying commitments restores mental space. Begin by examining what drains you daily. Some activities add no value but consume energy. Endless scrolling, constant notifications, and unnecessary conversations fracture attention. The Stoics practiced intentional withdrawal from noise. Silence sharpened thought. Simplification also applies to goals. Many people chase too many outcomes at once. This divides focus and increases anxiety. The disciplined mind chooses fewer goals and pursues them deeply. Marcus Aurelius believed that doing fewer things well creates dignity and calm. Material excess also fuels mental unrest. Owning too much creates maintenance, worry, and distraction. Stoicism values sufficiency over abundance. Seneca warned that possessions begin to own their owners. Reducing material clutter reduces mental burden. Simplifying your environment directly calms the nervous system. Clean spaces support clear thinking. Disorder signals unfinished business to the brain. Order restores a sense of control. Another source of complexity is emotional obligation. Saying yes to everything creates resentment. Stoicism teaches boundaries. Epictetus reminded that you are not required to attend every argument or accept every demand. Protecting time protects clarity. Information overload is a modern enemy of focus. Constant news consumption magnifies fear and urgency. The Stoics limited exposure to what they could influence. Knowing less often means thinking better. Simplifying language also reduces overthinking. Clear words reflect clear thought. Avoid exaggeration. Replace always with sometimes. Replace disaster with challenge. This precision lowers emotional intensity. The top 1% simplify decisions through rules. Simple principles reduce mental strain. For example, deciding when to work, when to rest, and when to disconnect eliminates constant debate. Stoicism encouraged living by reasoned principles. Simplification requires courage. Letting go feels risky. The mind fears missing out. Stoicism teaches trust in sufficiency. What is essential will remain. Relationships benefit from simplicity. Too many social obligations fragment attention. The Stoics valued a few meaningful connections over many shallow ones. Depth restores emotional stability. Simplifying expectations is equally important. Unrealistic standards generate self-criticism. Stoicism teaches acceptance of human limits. You are allowed to progress slowly. The simplified life creates room for reflection. Reflection replaces rumination. Instead of chaotic thinking, you engage in deliberate review. Marcus Aurelius practiced nightly reflection to clear the mind. Overthinking weakens when life is aligned. When actions match values, the mind stops arguing. Simplification brings alignment. This chapter teaches a Stoic truth. Mental mastery begins with life design. Remove what distracts and clarity returns. A quiet life creates a quiet mind. Chapter 5: Discipline the inner voice and end mental war. Overthinking is not caused by events. It is caused by the voice inside that never stops judging, predicting, and replaying. The Stoics understood that the greatest battlefield is internal. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes disturbed not by things, but by the opinions it forms about things. To think like the top 1%, you must discipline this inner voice. Most people believe every thought they have. This is the first mistake. Thoughts appear automatically, but wisdom decides which thoughts deserve attention. Epictetus taught that impressions arrive uninvited, but agreement is optional. When you stop agreeing with every thought, overthinking weakens. The inner voice often speaks in extremes. It uses words like always, never, ruined, and impossible. These words intensify emotion and trap the mind in loops. Stoicism trains the mind to replace exaggeration with accuracy. Accuracy brings calm. Mental war begins when the inner voice turns hostile. Self-criticism becomes constant. Mistakes are replayed. Futures are feared. This voice claims to protect you, but it drains strength. Seneca warned that harsh self-judgment destroys peace faster than external misfortune. Discipline begins with awareness. You must notice the tone of your inner speech. Is it reasonable or cruel? Is it helpful or repetitive? Awareness creates distance. Distance creates control. The Stoics practiced inner dialogue deliberately. Marcus Aurelius spoke to himself with patience and firmness. He corrected his thinking without anger. This is how discipline is built. Overthinking feeds on unanswered questions. What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if everything goes wrong? The Stoic response is not endless analysis. It is acceptance. You accept uncertainty and act anyway. The inner voice demands certainty before action. Stoicism rejects this demand. Courage moves forward without guarantees. Calm comes from effort, not prediction. Many thoughts repeat because they seek resolution. But some problems have no immediate solution. Discipline means allowing unresolved thoughts to pass without engagement. Not every question needs an answer today. Language shapes emotion. When the inner voice speaks harshly, the body tightens. When language softens, tension releases. Replace accusations with observations. Replace judgment with curiosity. The top 1% think clearly because they interrupt negative loops early. They do not let thoughts spiral unchecked. Stoicism teaches early intervention. Catch the thought before it grows. Another source of inner conflict is comparison. The voice compares progress, success, and worth. Comparison breeds dissatisfaction. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that each person runs their own race. Discipline means refusing unnecessary comparison. Fear-based thinking dominates the undisciplined mind. Fear imagines loss before it happens. Stoicism grounds the mind in present duty. What matters now is action aligned with values. Disciplining the inner voice does not mean silencing it completely. It means training it. Like a wild horse, the mind resists control at first. With patience, it learns direction. The Stoics used reflection to correct thought patterns. At the end of the day, they reviewed actions calmly. Not to punish themselves, but to improve. Reflection replaces rumination. Overthinking weakens when self-trust increases. Discipline builds trust. Each time you act despite doubt, confidence grows. Confidence quiets unnecessary thinking. The inner voice also amplifies emotion. Anger becomes stories. Sadness becomes identity. Discipline separates feeling from meaning. You feel emotions without letting them define you. Epictetus taught that freedom comes from mastering inner reactions. External control is limited. Internal control is always available. This truth empowers the disciplined mind. Calm people do not think less. They think better. They choose thoughts that serve action and release those that drain energy. Mental war ends when the inner voice becomes an ally instead of an enemy. This transformation requires daily practice. This chapter teaches a Stoic principle. Train the inner voice, and overthinking loses its power. When the mind speaks with discipline, clarity becomes natural. Chapter 6. Live by principles and think above the noise. Before this chapter begins, remember the voice behind these words. This is the Stoic tide. Overthinking ends permanently only when life is guided by principles instead of impulses. The Stoics believed that a clear set of values removes confusion before it begins. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if you align your actions with reason and virtue, the mind finds rest. To think like the top 1%, you must rise above mental noise by anchoring yourself to principles. Most people think endlessly because they lack inner direction. When values are unclear, every decision becomes a debate. Should I do this? Should I wait? Should I change? Principles answer these questions before they appear. They simplify life. Noise surrounds modern minds. Opinions, expectations, comparisons, and fears speak constantly. Stoicism teaches selective listening. Not every voice deserves attention. Not every idea deserves thought. Discipline begins with filtering. The top 1% do not chase clarity. They live by rules that create clarity. These rules are personal but grounded in reason. When you know what matters, the mind stops wandering. Principles act as mental shortcuts. Instead of analyzing every situation emotionally, you ask one question. Does this align with my values? This reduces overthinking instantly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he was meant to act with justice, patience, and self-control. These reminders guided his thoughts. When decisions came, he was ready. Living by principles means accepting discomfort. Sometimes the right choice feels harder. Overthinking often tries to avoid discomfort. Stoicism trains you to choose character over comfort. When principles lead, emotion follows instead of commands. You may feel fear, but fear does not decide. You may feel doubt, but doubt does not rule. This hierarchy creates calm. Many thoughts exist only because life lacks structure. Principles provide structure. They narrow options. Narrow options reduce mental strain. The Stoics believe that freedom comes from self-governance. When you govern yourself, external chaos loses influence. Your mind becomes stable even when circumstances are not. Living above the noise also means limiting unnecessary input. Constant news, gossip, and comparison overload the mind. The disciplined thinker consumes information intentionally. Silence becomes valuable. In silence, principles speak louder. Seneca believed wisdom grows when the mind is not distracted. Overthinking often disguises itself as preparation. In reality, it is avoidance. Principles push action. They demand movement even without certainty. The top 1% act while others hesitate. Not recklessly, but decisively. Decision ends overthinking. Action restores confidence. Principles also protect identity. When life challenges you, you do not ask who you should be. You already know. This certainty quiets mental storms. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should not waste time arguing about what a good person is. Be one. This mindset eliminates excessive analysis. Living by principles requires repetition. You must remind yourself daily. The mind forgets under pressure. Discipline restores memory. The noise of failure also fuels overthinking. Regret replays. Stoicism reframes failure as feedback. Lessons replace loops. When principles guide learning, mistakes lose emotional charge. They become information, not identity. Another source of mental noise is approval seeking. The Stoics warned against living for applause. External validation creates dependence. Independence creates calm. When you act according to values, opinions lose power. Praise and criticism become background sounds. The disciplined mind also accepts limits. You cannot control outcomes. You can control effort. This acceptance ends endless what-if thinking. Living above the noise means focusing on what is within control and releasing what is not. Epictetus called this the foundation of peace. Principles make boundaries clear. You know when to say no. Boundaries protect mental energy. When boundaries exist, resentment decreases. Resentment fuels overthinking. Calm grows where boundaries stand. The top 1% simplify life intentionally. They remove unnecessary decisions. Less choice equals less mental fatigue. Principles decide routines, habits, and priorities. Automation replaces analysis. Morning routines set mental tone. Evening reflection restores alignment. Stoics used both. Living by principles also builds self-respect. Self-respect silences self-doubt. Doubt feeds overthinking. When you trust your character, you stop second-guessing past decisions. Confidence settles the mind. Calm thinking is not passive. It is disciplined engagement with reality. Noise will always exist. Chaos will always return. Principles remain. This chapter teaches the final Stoic lesson. Overthinking ends when values lead and the mind follows. Think above the noise. Live by principle. Act with reason. And the mind will finally know peace. You've completed part 6. This is the Stoic Tide. If this chapter brought clarity to your mind, like to support disciplined thinking, share with someone drowning in mental noise, subscribe for Stoic wisdom, elite focus, and calm power for life.